I'm Mackenzie Rhodes, 29, and just last week, I finally earned the promotion I've been striving toward for years. I'm now the marketing director. To celebrate, I organized a dinner at Preston's with my family, including my sister Zoe, who lives with fibromyalgia. Our relationship has grown complicated since her diagnosis, and what happened that night revealed layers of unresolved family tension. Just as I announced my promotion, Zoe suddenly collapsed. But I was ready. I had recorded a video, just half an hour before, predicting exactly what she'd do. Before I share how everything played out, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe to follow my story as I balance family complexities while advancing in my career. Growing up, Zoe and I were incredibly close. Despite our 3-year age difference, she was my protector, my closest friend, the one who taught me to ride a bike and helped me survive the awkward world of middle school. We shared a bedroom until I was 13, often whispering late-night secrets after our parents had gone to bed. I looked up to her completely. When she got her driver's license, she'd pick me up for after-school ice cream runs. When I went through my first breakup at 16, she stayed up with me all night, spooning cookie dough straight from the tub and reminding me I deserved better. Our parents, Linda and Richard Rhodes, had very different approaches to parenting. Dad, an engineer, placed a high value on achievement and results. Mom, a nurse, seemed to have endless empathy for everyone except herself. Dad clearly favored me, the overachiever who brought home perfect grades and captained the debate team. Mom naturally connected more with Zoe, who was creative, emotional, and deeply intuitive. Things shifted dramatically during Zoe's second year of college. She began experiencing widespread pain that moved unpredictably through her body. Some days, she could barely get out of bed. Doctor after doctor ran tests, but results came back normal. A few even implied the pain might be psychological. I remember one telling her to try yoga and reduce stress, as if that were a thorough. After nearly a year of confusion, a rheumatologist finally diagnosed her with fibromyalgia. The family's reaction was mixed. Mom immediately stepped into a fierce caretaker role, researching the condition non-stop and going to every appointment. Dad was doubtful, sometimes muttering things like, "In my day, we just toughed it out." I landed somewhere in between. I believed she was hurting, but part of me wondered if she leaned into it more than necessary, especially when her symptoms seemed to spike around important events in my life. It's something I'm not proud of, but I sometimes question the timing. At my college graduation, Zoe was in such intense pain she required a wheelchair, drawing concerned stares. When I got my first job promotion, she had to leave the party early due to a migraine. I felt terrible even thinking it. Who would choose to be in pain? Still, the pattern became difficult to overlook. As her condition worsened, Zoe had to withdraw from college and move back home. Our parents converted the den into a bedroom to spare her the stairs. Meanwhile, I pressed forward with a marketing degree and landing a job at Bradley and Hayes, a solid mid-sized agency with an impressive client roster. I immersed myself in work, partly to avoid the growing tensions at home. Mom became Zoe's full-time caretaker, her daily routine revolving around flare-ups and doctor visits. Dad coped by working longer hours, unable to confront a problem that couldn't be solved with effort or logic. I started visiting less often, torn between guilt for being healthy and quietly resenting how Zoe's illness became the central focus of our family dynamic. By the time I turned 26, I had moved into an apartment downtown and was moving up the corporate ladder. My trips home became routine. Dad would boast about my achievements. Mom would softly steer the conversation back to Zoe's struggles, and Zoe would either play along cheerfully or have a health episode that redirected all attention to her. I began to dread family events, then feel ashamed for dreading them. 2 years ago, I began therapy with Dr. Taylor to unpack my mixed emotions. She helped me see it was possible to care deeply for Zoe while also feeling upset about the situation we were all in. She encouraged me to rebuild our bond independently from our parents' influence. I gave it a shot. I invited Zoe over for sister nights, learned more about fibromyalgia, and sent care packages with comfort items, warming pads, herbal teas. Sometimes, things clicked. We'd laugh over old memories or find comfort in our shared past. Other times, the silence between us was heavy with things unsaid. Last year, Zoe began dating Michael, a physical therapist she met at her pain management clinic. He seemed to understand her illness in a way that didn't feel condescending. For the first time in ages, she had someone besides Mom who believed her wholeheartedly. I was truly happy for her, even though I couldn't help noticing that her pain episodes were less frequent around him, but still resurfaced intensely during family events, particularly ones that highlighted my accomplishments. Dr. Taylor suggested that Zoe might, on some level, be seeking the attention she lost when her health forced her to abandon her own goals. It made sense, but understanding the pattern didn't make it easier to endure. I wanted to show empathy, but I also wanted to enjoy my achievements without them being eclipsed. By the time my recent promotion came around, Zoe and I had made progress, though the foundation remained fragile. I genuinely wanted her at the dinner. I hoped she'd be proud of me. Still, as I planned the evening, I couldn't ignore the quiet dread that history might repeat itself. I just didn't expect it to escalate the way it did, that it would finally force us all to confront the years of avoidance and dysfunction we'd lived with. The last 6 months at Bradley and Hayes were intense. Our team secured the Meridian Hotel's account, a high-profile client we had pursued for years. As lead strategist, I was responsible for their rebrand, a major opportunity that could either launch us into the industry's top tier or become a high-stakes flop. I barely saw my apartment except to shower. My boyfriend, Brian, was endlessly patient, bringing meals to my desk, listening to my late-night brainstorming sessions. I skipped social events, worked weekends, and dreamed about typography and color palettes. The campaign consumed me the best way. I felt energized, driven, completely in my zone. When we finally presented our pitch to Meridian's executive team, I was nervous but completely prepared. I had rehearsed the presentation until every line came naturally. I anticipated every question they might ask and built backup plans into the proposal. So when the CEO leaned forward and said, "This is exactly what we've been looking for," the sense of validation was overwhelming. That night, the team went out to celebrate, but I knew that the real work was just beginning. The next 3 months flew by in a blur of late-night revisions, unexpected obstacles, and non-stop teamwork, but it paid off. The campaign launched 2 overwhelmingly positive results. Social media engagement soared by 340%. Booking rates jumped 28% in the first month, and several industry publications highlighted our work as a strong example of successful rebranding. 2 weeks after the performance, metrics confirmed what we hoped. Nathan Phillips, our managing director, called me into his office. I sat across from his large mahogany desk as he leaned back, giving me a thoughtful look. "The board and I have been discussing the company's next steps," he said, lightly tapping a folder with his pen. "With the growth we're seeing, we need to restructure leadership. We're looking for someone with vision and a clear track record, someone to take on the role of marketing director." My heart started racing. This was the role I had been working toward since the day I joined the firm 5 years ago. "Your work on the Meridian campaign showed the kind of innovation and execution we're aiming for," Nathan added. "We'd like to offer you the position with a revised salary and a team expansion." I kept my composure during the conversation, asking thoughtful questions about the roles, responsibilities, and the expectations. But as soon as I left his office, I had to slip into the bathroom just to collect myself. The salary bump alone would finally allow me to pay off my student loans, and maybe even start looking at condos instead of renewing my lease. More than anything, the recognition made the sacrifices worth it. The late nights, missed weekends, and personal milestones I'd set aside. That evening, Brian took me to our favorite rooftop bar. As we clinked glasses beneath the string lights and looked out over the skyline, he asked how I planned to share the news with my family. "I want to do something meaningful," I told him. "Something that brings everyone together in a positive way." That's when the idea of dinner at Preston's came to me. It was the restaurant where we had celebrated family milestones when I was younger. My parents' anniversaries, Zoe's high school graduation, my college acceptance. Elegant but not over the top, with private rooms perfect for an intimate dinner. I booked a room for the following Friday and sent out formal invitations to my parents, Zoe, my Aunt Grace, and my cousin Rachel. I asked for cocktail attire, something to set a tone that this was a real celebration. Brian had a late meeting but planned to join us for dessert. As the day got closer, I focused on every detail. I selected a menu that accounted for everyone's dietary needs. I ordered a custom cake with the Bradley and Hayes logo and "Congratulations, Marketing Director" written in clean, classic lettering. I picked a champagne I knew even my father would approve of. The night before, Mom called to confirm Zoe was feeling well and would definitely be there. "She's really proud of you, sweetheart," she said, but something in her voice sounded unsure, as though she was trying to reassure herself as much as me. "We all are." I wanted to believe her. I really did. I wanted this dinner to feel different, to enjoy a moment of recognition without Zoe's health becoming the main focus again. But as I hung up the phone, the familiar knot of anxiety formed in my stomach. I couldn't shake the feeling that I might be setting myself up for disappointment. Brian must have seen it on my face. As we were picking out jewelry for the next evening, he set down the earrings he was holding and sat beside me. "What's wrong?" he asked gently, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Nothing," I said automatically. Then, I sighed. "Everything. I'm excited about tomorrow but also dreading it." "Is that awful?" "It's honest," he said. "And based on pretty consistent past experiences. Have you thought about what Dr. Taylor suggested?" I nodded slowly. Dr. Taylor had recommended I document the patterns I was noticing, not accuse Zoe or catch her doing something wrong, but to help process my own emotions and maybe open a more honest conversation down the line. "Maybe I'll record something before everyone arrives," I said, just to sort through my thoughts. What I didn't say, what I was barely admitting to myself, was that part of me wanted some kind of validation. Something concrete to show that my frustration wasn't just in my head. The pattern, after all, had been there for years. It began subtly, at my high school graduation party. Zoe, then a sophomore in college, developed a sudden migraine and had to lie down in a dark room. My parents took turns checking on her while I opened gifts with friends at the dining table, trying to ignore the feeling of being overlooked. In college, when I made the dean's list freshman year, my parents planned a dinner to celebrate that morning. Zoe called to say she had sprained her wrist in a fall. Dinner was canceled, and we ended up eating pizza at the hospital while she got x-rays. After her fibromyalgia diagnosis, the incidents felt more medically grounded but still followed a familiar pattern. My college graduation should have been a highlight. I'd double majored in marketing and business, graduated summa cum laude, but all anyone could talk about that day was Zoe attending in a wheelchair. How brave she was to be there through the pain. The photos from that day show me smiling in my cap and gown, while family members hovered closely around Zoe. 2 years ago, when I was promoted to senior strategist, we planned a quiet family dinner. Zoe showed up looking pale and had to leave midway through with a severe migraine and nausea. My dad drove her home while Mom packed up dinner for them. I stayed behind with Aunt Grace, who gave my hand a soft pat and said, "Your sister Jess can't help it, dear." My engagement party to Jason, now my ex, was probably the most difficult. Zoe had been doing well for months, even taking on part-time work as a freelance graphic designer. But right as Jason and I were about to give our toast, she fainted near the gift table. The night ended as she was rushed to the ER. Tests showed there was nothing new or alarming in Amber's condition, just a typical fibromyalgia flare-up. But for Jason, who had already voiced concerns about my family dynamics, that night was the breaking point. 2 months later, he ended our engagement, citing my difficulty in setting boundaries as one of the key reasons. It was after that experience that I finally began therapy with Dr. Taylor. In her calm, book-lined office, I started saying out loud the thoughts I'd been too ashamed to fully acknowledge, even to myself. What if Amber's pain was genuine, but her timing wasn't accidental? What if, without realizing it, she was using her illness to keep the family's attention? And what if my parents, despite their good intentions, were enabling a pattern that wasn't helping anyone? Family roles often become rigid in the context of chronic illness, Dr. Taylor explained. It's not unusual for the entire system to reorganize around one member's condition. Your sister's pain may be very real, but the way it surfaces and when can be shaped by unconscious emotional factors. She recommended I start keeping a record, not to accuse Amber or challenge the validity of her symptoms, but to help me gain clarity and track what I'd been sensing for years. So I began documenting incidents in a private journal app. The pattern quickly became clear. Amber's health crises consistently occurred during my key moments: graduations, promotions, celebrations. Sometimes the episodes were serious and required medical attention. Other times, they were just disruptive enough to draw focus. In every instance, my parents would immediately respond with concern, shifting the entire family's attention back to her. When I started dating Brian a year ago, I was cautious about introducing him to the full complexity of my family dynamics, but he caught on quickly. After just 2 family gatherings, he noticed the trend himself. "Have you ever brought it up with her?" he asked on our drive home from a Sunday lunch where Amber had experienced sudden vertigo just as I was about to share news of a major campaign win. "I can't," I told him. "How do you confront someone about possibly using their illness, consciously or not, to redirect attention? It makes me sound cruel." "Not if you come from a place of care," he said gently. "Maybe recording your thoughts ahead of time could help you work through what you want to say." That idea stayed with me and eventually shaped what happened on the night of my promotion dinner. As the day approached, my anxiety grew. This milestone mattered. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to have it lost in yet another episode. The night before, I barely slept, running through possible scenarios in my mind, preparing for different ways Amber might react, and imagining how I might respond. On the day of the dinner, I arrived at Preston's an hour early to make sure everything was perfect. The private dining room looked beautiful: crisp cream linens, low floral arrangements of hydrangeas and roses, chilled champagne waiting, and the custom cake stored safely in the kitchen. Everything was ready. 30 minutes before everyone was due to arrive, I sat alone at the head of the table and opened the video app on my phone. My finger hovered over the record button for a moment, and I questioned whether doing this was unkind or so. But then I remembered Dr. Taylor's advice. This was about understanding, not blame. It's 6:30 p.m. on Friday, October 15th. I began feeling slightly self-conscious. In half an hour, my family will arrive to celebrate my promotion to marketing director at Bradley and Hayes. Based on past experiences, I believe Amber will have a health issue that coincides with the moment I share my news. As I spoke, my voice grew more confident. "I think it will happen when I stand to make my formal announcement. She might suddenly experience a migraine or severe pain. If it's particularly dramatic, she could even faint. My mother will immediately tend to her. My dad will follow her lead, looking uncomfortable. And what was meant to be a celebration of my achievement will once again revolve around Amber." I paused, then continued. I'm not saying her pain isn't real. I believe she does suffer from fibromyalgia, but I question the consistent timing of these episodes and whether there's an unconscious pattern at work. I'm making this video not to prove a point, but to help myself see things clearly and, maybe, to start a long overdue conversation. I stopped recording, feeling a strange mix of guilt and affirmation. What I didn't know then was that this short video, just under 3 minutes, would mark the turning point in a story we'd all been avoiding for too long. Preston's was, just as I remembered, classic and refined. The restaurant occupied the main floor of a restored historic building downtown, with exposed brick walls, high ceilings, and tall windows that let in the last golden light of the day. The main dining area buzzed with conversation and laughter, but the private room offered a peaceful retreat. I made one final check of my appearance in the mirror, smoothing the navy blue dress I'd chosen, adjusting the gold necklace Brian had given me for our anniversary. I looked composed and celebratory, at least on the outside. I practiced my smile, trying to anchor myself in the joy of the occasion, even as anxiety churned underneath. My parents arrived first, right on time. Dad looked slightly uncomfortable in a suit, but had clearly made the effort, and it touched me. Mom wore a floral dress I recognized from other special events. Her hair had been freshly dyed to hide the gray. She hugged me tightly. "We're so proud of you, sweetheart," she whispered, but her eyes kept flicking toward the entrance, clearly anticipating Amber's arrival. "The table looks beautiful," she said, admiring the setup. "You've really thought of everything." Dad handed me a small gift bag. "Just a little something to celebrate," he said in his usual understated way. Inside was a Mont Blanc pen, engraved with my initials and new title. It was exactly the kind of meaningful, practical gift he always chose, something elegant, meant to mark success and help build on it. "It's perfect," I said, hugging him. "Thank you both." A few minutes later, Aunt Grace arrived in her usual whirlwind of perfume and jangling jewelry. My mother's older sister had never married or had children. She'd traveled widely and kept a large, unconventional circle of friends. She'd always been a cheerleader for me, sneaking me second servings of dessert as a kid, and later urging me to chase my career ambitions, especially when Mom seemed more focused on Zoe's health. "Marketing director," she exclaimed as she hugged me. "Robert, your daughter's a powerhouse. You saving enough for retirement? She'll be running that company within 5 years. Mark my words." Dad actually smiled at that, beaming with pride. Fanning her gently with a folded napkin, her bracelets jingling softly with each movement, Mom clutched Amber's hand, eyes wide and panicked, whispering her name over and over. Dad hovered beside her, still holding his phone, clearly unsure whether to press the emergency call or not. Michael remained calm, cradling Amber upright and speaking in a low, reassuring voice. I stood frozen in place, champagne flute still in hand, my mouth half open from a sentence I'd never finish. All eyes had shifted away, my moment gone, overtaken by a scene so familiar it felt rehearsed. I watched as the scenario I'd predicted unfolded step by step. My mother's tears, my father's helplessness, the guests all shifting uneasily in their chairs, and Amber, limp and pale, the center of gravity in the room once again. Rachel returned with a glass of water, placing it on the table near Amber. She didn't speak, didn't react with alarm, just moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had seen all of this before. Amber stirred slowly, murmuring faintly. "I'm okay," she whispered, barely audible. "Just dizzy." Michael helped her sit up straighter, adjusting the chair and rubbing her back lightly. Mom immediately began listing Amber's symptoms to no one in particular, as if preparing for a doctor's visit. She was tired all day. She said her arms were weak this morning. I knew something was off. "I think we should take her home," Michael said softly, exchanging a glance with my mother. "Yes," Mom agreed, already gathering her purse and Amber's wrap. "Let's not push it." And just like that, the evening fractured. The energy in the room evaporated. My announcement, the cake, the toast, they all receded like decorations left behind after a party had moved elsewhere. "I'm so sorry," Amber said to me, reaching across the table weakly. "I didn't mean to ruin anything." I wanted to believe her, part of me did, but the timing made it impossible not to question. I forced a smile and squeezed her hand. "Feel better," I said. Michael guided Amber to her feet with care, her movements still shaky. My parents followed closely, fussing and adjusting her coat as though she might break. Aunt Grace hovered behind them, muttering something about migraines and low blood sugar. Within minutes, they were gone. The room was quiet again, except for the hum of conversation returning in the distance from the main dining area. I stood beside the untouched cake, its elegant frosting now feeling painfully ironic. Rachel came to stand next to me. "You okay?" she asked gently. I nodded, unable to find words. Brian arrived moments later, slightly out of breath from rushing over after his meeting. One look at my face, the still full champagne glasses, and the empty chairs told him everything he needed to know. He didn't ask what happened. He just took my hand and gave it a quiet squeeze. Later that night, I watched the video I'd recorded earlier. My own voice played back to me, precise, eerily accurate in its predictions. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, but I also felt something else. Ready? Ready to finally stop pretending that this wasn't a pattern. Ready to talk about it openly with my therapist, with Rachel, maybe eventually with Amber herself. Because while I loved my sister, I was no longer willing to sideline my life in service of a dynamic that quietly erased me. The dinner had been meant to mark the start of a new chapter in my career. In a way, it still did, but not in the way I expected. The promotion had given me a professional title. The events of that night gave me a personal one. Someone finally willing to see the truth and speak it out loud. With the menu in hand, my mom sat beside Chloe, gently whispering reassurances, though Chloe still didn't respond. Dad lingered nearby, uncertain, his earlier celebratory mood gone. As I watched this all-too-familiar scene unfold again, something in me shifted. Maybe it was years of buried frustration finally bubbling up, or the stark contrast between my carefully planned celebration and this new wave of chaos. Or maybe it was simply the sharp realization that what I'd predicted had just happened exactly as I thought it would. Whatever it was, I suddenly felt focused and ready to act. I placed my champagne glass down and reached for my purse. "She's coming too," Michael said as Chloe's eyes fluttered open. She let out a quiet sound and reached for her forehead. "Oh honey," Mom murmured, stroking her hair. "You're okay? We're all here." "I'm really sorry," Chloe whispered weakly. "I didn't mean to ruin your night, Danielle. You felt like you were going to faint," I said, calmly finishing the sentence for her. "Just like the migraine during my graduation speech, the emergency room trip at my engagement party, or the vertigo that kept you from my first promotion dinner." The room fell silent. Mom looked shocked, disapproval clear on her face. Dad shifted awkwardly, but didn't seem surprised. Rachel's expression was a mix of concern and quiet recognition. Aunt Grace, ever the observer, looked fascinated. "What exactly are you saying?" Mom asked, clearly defensive. "Your sister has a real medical condition she can't control when it flares up." "I know Chloe has fibromyalgia," I replied, pulling my phone from my bag. "I've never denied her pain. What I'm questioning is the timing of her most dramatic episodes." Chloe was now fully alert, some color returning to her cheeks as she processed what was happening. "Danielle, that's not fair," she said, her voice low. "Isn't it?" I said, raising my phone. "I recorded something earlier, before anyone got here. I think it's worth watching." "This is completely out of line," Mom started, but Dad raised his hand. "Let's hear what Danielle has to say," he said, his analytical side perhaps finally seeing a pattern he hadn't wanted to admit. I hit play on the video and turned the screen so everyone could see. There I was, sitting in the same room, calmly speaking to the camera. "It's 6:30 p.m. on Friday, October 15th. I said in the recording, my family is coming soon to celebrate my promotion to marketing director at Bradley & Hayes. Based on past patterns, I predict Chloe will experience a health issue right around the time attention turns to my announcement." Chloe's face fell as she watched, eyes brimming with tears. Michael looked from the screen to her, silently trying to read her reaction. Mom's mouth hung open in disbelief. The video continued. "Specifically, I think it'll happen when I make my formal announcement. She may get a migraine, experience sharp pain, or if it's more dramatic, faint entirely." A small sob escaped. Chloe Dad was now nodding slowly, as if something long unclear had finally clicked. "I'm not saying her pain isn't real," I continued in the recording. "I do believe she lives with fibromyalgia. What I question is the recurring timing, and whether it reflects an unconscious need to remain the emotional center of the family." I stopped the video. I didn't need to play more. Silence took over the room, interrupted only by faint noise from the main restaurant and Chloe's quiet crying. "How dare you?" Mom said finally, her voice shaking. "You planned this? You ambushed your sister while she's suffering." "That's not what I'm doing," I said, though I wasn't sure anymore if it had turned into that. "What I'm saying is that our family has developed unhealthy dynamics. Chloe's illness is real, but how we respond has created patterns that hurt everyone involved. So now it's our fault." Mom shot back, motioning toward Dad. "Bad parents for caring about our daughter." "No one here is a bad parent," I replied, trying to express the years of mixed feelings that led to this moment. "But honestly, can anyone say they haven't noticed what I'm talking about?" The silence that followed was all the answer I needed. Just then, the door opened and Brian arrived, smiling until he saw everyone's faces. "Sorry I'm late," he said, hesitating. "Did I miss the announcement?" "You missed the most interesting part," Aunt Grace chimed in with a bit too much enthusiasm. Chloe stood abruptly, wobbling slightly. "I need some air," she said softly, and quickly left the room before anyone could stop her. "Now look what you've done," Mom said, rising to follow. Dad looked conflicted, torn between his daughter and his wife. "Linda, wait," he said. "Maybe we need to talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about," Mom snapped. Danielle made herself perfectly clear. She followed Chloe out. Dad turned to me, his face a mix of disappointment and dawning realization. "I'll check on them," he said finally. "We'll talk later." And just like that, he was gone, leaving me with Rachel, Aunt Grace, Michael, and Brian, who was still trying to catch up. The celebration I'd spent so much time planning was now just a memory, the untouched dessert. the half-empty champagne glasses, and the congratulatory cake still sitting in the kitchen, uneaten, while Aunt Grace said, breaking the silence, "That was the most dramatic family dinner since your grandfather told us he was leaving your grandma for his secretary at Thanksgiving in 1987. And somehow, despite it all, I started to laugh a strange, nervous laugh that helped release everything I'd been holding in." Rachel joined in, and then Brian. While Michael remained silent, eyes fixed on the door Chloe had just exited through, he finally said, "I should check on her," and stood. "Michael," I called as he reached the doorway. "I never meant to hurt her. I just couldn't keep pretending." He paused, looked back at me with a neutral expression, and said, "I know you believe that. And Chloe's pain is real even if the timing isn't random." As he walked out, I sank into my chair, the pride I'd felt over my promotion dimmed by the emotional fallout of what had just happened. Was I wrong? I asked the few people still at the table, doubt creeping in. "You weren't wrong about the pattern," Rachel said gently, "but maybe there were better ways to bring it up than during a dinner in front of everyone." Brian moved behind me, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. "You spoke your truth. It was brave. The consequences are messy, but sometimes that's how real change begins." I nodded, though I couldn't stop thinking about Chloe's expression. As she'd watched the video, how perfectly my prediction had matched the reality. I'd wanted recognition, wanted my moment not to be overshadowed again, but somehow, I felt smaller, not vindicated. The dinner had become unforgettable, but not for the reasons I'd hoped. The restaurant manager approached the doorway again, concern written across his face. "Is everything all right, Ms. Evans?" he asked, glancing at the half-cleared table and untouched meals. "Just a family issue," I replied, slipping into a calm, professional tone. "Could we get the check, please, and have the cake boxed up?" He nodded, clearly relieved this wasn't going to become his responsibility. "Of course, right away." Turning back to the three people still with me, Brian, Rachel, and Aunt Grace, I offered a quiet apology. "I'm sorry. This isn't what I wanted for tonight." Aunt Grace dismissed my words with a wave of her hand. "Families are complicated, dear. Trust me, I've caused a few scenes myself over the years." "So, what happens now?" Brian asked, sitting beside me and gently taking my hand under the table. "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never actually called it out before. I just couldn't go through another dinner where Chloe pulled the focus again." Rachel finished for me. She'd always understood the dynamic, without judgment. "You're not wrong, Danielle, but I think what Michael said matters too. Her pain is real even if the timing seems suspicious." "I know," I said quickly. "I've never thought she was faking the pain itself. It's the way everyone reacts to it. The way it takes over every time something good happens for you," Brian added. I nodded, grateful for his support, and how no one ever acknowledges it, like I'm making it up. Like I'm selfish for wanting my own accomplishments to be celebrated too. The door opened again, and to my surprise, Dad returned alone. He looked older, somehow, as he took the seat across from me. "Your mother's taking Chloe and Michael home," he said. "She asked me to go with them, but I felt we should talk." "Dad, I'm sorry if I embarrassed you," I began, but he shook his head. "No, I'm the one who should apologize," he said, the words clearly hard to say. "I've seen this happening for years, but I didn't have the courage to deal with it. It was easier to focus on your milestones and let your mother handle Chloe's care. But the emotions around having a chronically ill child, it's not simple." His honesty stunned me. Dad had never been one to open up like this or admit when he'd fallen short. "That video," he went on, "it was like holding a mirror up to our family. Uncomfortable, but maybe necessary." "I didn't mean to ambush anyone," I said. "I recorded it for myself to help make sense of things. Playing it tonight was impulsive. Given what happened, understandable," Aunt Grace chimed in. "Sometimes it takes something dramatic to break through years of denial." "Your mom doesn't see it that way," Dad said. "She thinks you planned tonight to make Chloe look bad, to humiliate her." The accusation stung because, in a way, there was some truth in it. I had wanted validation. I had wanted them to finally see the pattern. "Was Chloe faking?" Rachel asked, voicing the question we'd all tiptoed around. Dad paused, thoughtful. "I don't think she's consciously choosing to have these episodes. But after seeing that video, and how exactly your prediction matched what happened, it's hard to believe it's all coincidence. Subconscious behavior can be powerful," Brian offered. "She might genuinely feel worse in those moments without realizing the connection." "Whatever the cause," Dad said, "this has brought to light things we've avoided for too long. Your mother and I have never fully agreed on how to support Chloe. She believes in total unquestioning care. I've had doubts for years, wondering if we were enabling something without realizing it." The door burst open again. Mom stood in the doorway, her usually put-together appearance rumpled, eyes red from crying. Her voice trembled with anger. "How could you stay here with her?" she demanded, glaring at Dad. "After what she did to your daughter." "Linda," Dad said, clearly tired. "Danielle is also our daughter. Our daughter who just accused her chronically ill sister publicly of faking symptoms for attention." "That's not what I said," I responded, rising to meet her eye. "I said Chloe's pain is real, but the timing, it keeps happening whenever something is supposed to be about me. And you know that. You just won't admit it." Complex reality, Mom repeated, as if the words were ridiculous. The reality is that your sister lives with a debilitating illness that most people, including, apparently, her own sister, don't even believe exists. I do believe it's real, I said. What I don't believe is that it's just coincidence, that her worst episodes always line up with my milestones. So now you're the victim, Mom snapped, her tone biting. Poor Danielle, so successful, so healthy, but can't bear not being the center of attention for 1 minute. Her words felt like a slap. I'd expected resistance, maybe even denial, but not outright hostility. Not being cast as selfish for simply wanting to be seen. That's enough, Linda, Dad said firmly. Angry, Chloe continued, her voice soft but steady. It felt like a betrayal, like you'd been keeping score on every time I got sick. But then I kept thinking about what you said, and I realized you weren't accusing me of faking anything. You were just tired. Tired of always feeling like you come second. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. That's exactly it, I said. I've always believed your pain is real. But the way everything shifts the moment I have something to celebrate, it started to feel like I didn't matter unless I was helping someone else. Especially you. Chloe nodded slowly, absorbing my words. I didn't see it that way. I was so wrapped up in managing my symptoms, I didn't realize how much space I was taking up in the room, how much attention I've come to expect without even knowing it. We were quiet again for a moment, the sounds of the park filling in the space between us. A child laughed in the distance. The wind rustled through leaves just starting to change color. I never wanted to take things from you, Chloe said, her voice catching. I was just trying to survive. I know, I said, but survival doesn't have to come at the cost of everything else. I think we've all gotten used to reacting to your pain in a way that's become automatic, and it's hurt both of us. Chloe looked at me, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time, genuine reflection. What happens now? She asked. I don't know, I admitted, but I want us to start being honest. Not just about your health, but about how it affects the rest of us too. Maybe that means more therapy. Maybe it means boundaries. Maybe it means we finally stop pretending everything's fine when it's clearly not. I want that too, she said, offering a tentative smile. And I don't want to keep ruining your moments. I want to be there for them. For you? I smiled back. Small but real. Then let's try. We sat for a while longer, not rushing to fill the silence this time. It felt different, like the beginning of something new. Not a resolution, not a perfect fix, but a shift. A willingness to face things we'd both avoided for too long. As we stood to leave, Chloe reached out and lightly touched my arm. Congratulations again, she said sincerely. You really earned it. Thanks, I replied, and for the first time since that chaotic dinner, I actually believed it. As I walked back to meet Brian, I felt lighter. The road ahead would still be complicated, but for now, there was progress. And maybe that was enough. Relationships, Angie continued, her voice quieter now. At first I was just angry, she admitted, but that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over everything you said, the graduation, your engagement party, your first promotion, dinner. The pattern you pointed out, it was real. I couldn't deny it anymore. Her honesty stunned me. I had expected defensiveness or blame anything but this quiet acceptance. I talked to David about it, she went on. He's noticed it too, but didn't know how to bring it up. And I talked to my therapist, yes, she added with a faint smile at my raised eyebrows. I've been seeing one for 2 years, mostly to help with pain management. I didn't know that, I said. There's a lot we don't know about each other anymore, she replied, and that's part of the problem. She paused, took a slow breath, and continued. My therapist helped me realize something I've been avoiding. When I first got sick, I lost the version of myself I'd been building: my education, career, plans, independence. The only role I had left was being the one everyone took care of. That became my identity. I listened closely, hearing not just her words but the deep hurt behind them. You, she said, were becoming everything I thought I would be. Successful, independent, building a life on your terms. Every time you achieved something new, it reminded me of everything I felt I'd lost. The pain is real, Casey, but the timing, that was my subconscious trying to take back some sense of control, some attention. The only kind I thought I still had access to. Tears filled my eyes. At her openness, I never wanted to compete with you. I told her, I just wanted to share things with you. I wanted us to be close, to be proud of each other. I know, she said softly. Part of me was happy for you, but another part of me was so jealous it hurt physically. And then I'd feel guilty. For that, it created this horrible loop. We sat with that truth in silence for a long time. What do we do now? I finally asked. Mom's still furious with you, Angie said. She's turned what you said into more fuel for her protective instincts. But Dad, he's been asking questions, starting to see the bigger picture. And what about you? I asked. She turned fully to face me. I want my sister back, she said plainly. I want to find a way forward that respects my condition but doesn't revolve around it. I want to celebrate your wins without feeling small. I just don't know how yet. Maybe we start with honesty. I offered. No more avoiding hard conversations. No more buried resentment. And therapy, she added. My therapist. Thinks we could benefit from some joint sessions. Would you be open to that? Yes, I said immediately. Absolutely, she smiled, this time a smile that reached her eyes. Congratulations, by the way, marketing director at 29? That's incredible. I saw the Meridian campaign, those downtown billboards. Gorgeous. And just like that, we started rebuilding. We talked for 2 hours on that park bench about everything from my job to her relationship with David, from childhood memories to our hopes for the future. For the first time in years, I felt like I was talking to Angie, not her illness. 3 weeks later, we had our first therapy session together. A week after that, we invited our parents. Those early family sessions were tougher, emotional, and sometimes uncomfortable. But they were honest in a way our family hadn't been in a long time. Mom resisted at first. She held tight to her role as Angie's defender and saw me as the aggressor. But as Angie began setting healthier boundaries, Mom slowly began to reflect on her own behavior. To everyone's surprise, Dad thrived in therapy. He began speaking openly about the guilt and confusion he'd carried for years, emotions he'd never felt allowed to express. At work, I threw myself into my new leadership role. The memory of that chaotic dinner slowly lost its sting as I focused on the opportunities ahead. Brian remained my anchor, steady, supportive, and always willing to listen when I needed to process the complicated family dynamics. 6 months later, we tried again. A new restaurant, a smaller gathering, just immediate family. During dessert, Angie had a flare-up. Her hands shook as she lifted her cup, but instead of shutting down or causing a scene, she simply said, "Rough moment, could someone pass the cream?" Dad helped. Mom asked quietly if she needed meds. Then the conversation picked back up. The moment wasn't ignored, but it didn't derail the evening. It was small, but it felt like progress. Walking home through the city with Brian, that night he asked what I was thinking. Success? I replied. I used to think it meant titles and awards, but maybe it's this: having the courage to change dysfunctional patterns, to speak uncomfortable truths, to build relationships that aren't based on guilt or performance. He squeezed my hand. That sounds like wisdom earned the hard way. The hardest? I agreed, but also the most meaningful. As we come to the end of this story, I want to ask, have you ever had to confront uncomfortable family dynamics to protect your own mental or emotional well-being? Did it lead to healing, or are you still in the process?